Welcome to the deep dive.
It's great to be here.
You know, self-driving cars, they're everywhere in the news these days.
Yeah, it feels like you can't escape them.
Right, and it's such a fascinating topic. But sometimes it can feel a little overwhelming.
Absolutely.
All the technology, the implications for society, the future, like where do you even begin?
Right, you can feel like you're drinking from a fire hose.
Exactly. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to take a deep dive into the world of self-driving cars. Our mission is to cut through all the hype and really understand the core of what's happening, you know? What's the reality of this technology? What are the real benefits and challenges? And ultimately, are we, as a society, truly ready for a driverless future?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it?
It is. It really is. So to help us navigate this, I thought it would be helpful to break it down into a few key areas.
Okay, listen.
So first, we'll define what a self-driving car actually is, because it's more nuanced than you might think.
Yeah, there's a whole spectrum of automation.
Exactly. Then we'll kind of peek under the hood and look at the technology that makes it all work. All the sensors, the AI, it's pretty mind-blowing stuff.
It is. It's amazing how far we've come.
Then we'll weigh the potential benefits that get everyone so excited, like increased safety and convenience, against the very real challenges and risks.
Right, because there are definitely two sides to this coin.
For sure. We'll also look at the legal and ethical issues, because this is where things get really complicated.
Oh, yeah. Tons of gray areas there.
We'll see where self-driving cars are actually operating in the world today and consider what a future without human drivers might look like.
A lot to unpack there.
And then finally, we'll look ahead at what the next few years might hold. So buckle up. It's going to be a fascinating ride.
I'm ready.
Okay, so let's start with the basics. What exactly do we mean by self-driving car?
Well, like I said, there's a whole range of automation when it comes to vehicles. The Society of Automotive Engineers, SAE, they've actually created a scale to define these different levels. It's called the levels of automation, and it goes from level 0 to level 5.
Okay, so level 0, that's your classic car, right? No automation at all.
Exactly. The driver does everything: steering, braking, acceleration, the whole shebang.
And then level 1, that's where we start to see a little bit of help, right?
Yeah. Level 1 introduces some basic driver assistance features. Like you might have adaptive cruise control, where the car can maintain a set speed and following distance, or lane departure warnings, which alert you if you start drifting out of your lane.
Right, right. So it's still very much the driver in control, but the car's starting to lend a hand.
Precisely. It's like having a very attentive co-pilot who just nudges you in the right direction occasionally.
I like that analogy. And then level 2, that's where things get a bit more interesting, right?
It is. This is what you see in many newer cars on the road today: partial automation. A level 2 system can actually handle both steering and acceleration simultaneously under certain conditions. Think of features like lane centering assist combined with adaptive cruise control. You know, the car's doing a bit more of the work.
Right, so it can feel almost like it's driving itself sometimes.
Yeah, and that's where it gets a bit tricky. Because even though the car is doing more, the driver still has to be fully engaged at level 2, constantly monitoring the driving environment and ready to take over at any moment.
So no falling asleep at the wheel at level 2.
Definitely not. You are still the boss, ultimately.
Okay, so just to recap for everyone, level 0, 1, and 2, they're all about driver assistance. It's not truly self-driving in the way we often imagine.
Exactly. The big shift happens at level 3.
Which is?
Level 3 is what we call conditional automation. This is where, under specific limited conditions, the car can actually handle all aspects of driving, and the driver can theoretically disengage from monitoring the environment.
Oh, wow. Okay, so the driver can actually take their hands off the wheel and their eyes off the road.
In theory, yes. But here's the catch. The system will still request the driver's intervention if it encounters a situation it can't handle.
Ah, okay, so you still need to be ready to jump back in at a moment's notice.
Exactly. Think of it like the car's driving, but you're on standby, just in case.
All right, so level 3 is a big jump, but still not quite fully driverless. And that brings us to level 4.
Right. Level 4 is high automation. In specific geographic areas and under certain conditions, the vehicle can perform all driving tasks without any human intervention. So theoretically, within those specific conditions, you could fall asleep in the back seat and the car would handle everything.
Wow, okay, so that's starting to sound like the driverless future we often hear about.
It is, but it's important to remember that it's limited to those defined operating domains. If the car encounters a situation outside of those domains, it will safely bring itself to a stop.
Got it. So level 4 is true driverless operation, but with limitations. And then there's level 5, the holy grail of self-driving.
Yes, level 5 is full automation. This is the completely driverless future we often see in science fiction movies. A level 5 vehicle can handle all driving tasks in all conditions everywhere. There's no steering wheel, no pedals, because human intervention is simply not needed.
Wow, that's incredible. So just to be clear, level 5 doesn't actually exist yet, right?
Correct. It's still in the realm of research and development.
Okay, so we've got a good handle now on the different levels of self-driving. But how does all this actually work? What kind of technology is making these cars essentially see and think?
Well, it's a pretty amazing combination of different technologies all working together. One of the key components is sensors.
Sensors? Like what kind of sensors?
The one you've probably heard of is LiDAR.
Oh, yeah, LiDAR. I know that's used in some other applications too, right?
Exactly. It's used in things like surveying and archaeology.
So how does it work in a self-driving car?
Basically, the car emits rapid pulses of laser light, and then it measures how long it takes for those pulses to bounce back off objects. That information is used to create a very detailed three-dimensional map of the environment.
Okay, so it's like the car is creating its own 3D world.
Exactly. It's constantly scanning its surroundings and building a picture of what's around it.
And that's just LiDAR. What about other sensors?
Right. They also use radar, which, like LiDAR, measures distance, but it uses radio waves instead of light.
Oh, okay. So what's the advantage of radar over LiDAR?
Well, radar is better at penetrating things like fog and heavy rain.
That makes sense. So it's more reliable in bad weather.
Exactly. It's like having a backup vision system when things get a little murky.
Smart. So we've got LiDAR, radar. What else?
Then there are ultrasonic sensors, which use sound waves to detect objects at very close range. You often see these in parking assist systems, helping the car judge distances to obstacles when you're maneuvering into a tight spot.
So for those tricky parking jobs.
Precisely. And of course, you can't forget cameras.
Right, cameras. That seems obvious, but I guess I didn't even think about it.
The cameras are like the car's eyes, capturing images of the world around it, seeing things like traffic lights, lane markings, pedestrians. It's all visual data that the car needs to process.
So you've got all these sensors collecting tons of data. What happens to all that information? How does the car actually make sense of it all?
That's where the magic of artificial intelligence, or AI, comes in.
AI, the brains of the operation.
Exactly. All the data from the sensors is fed into these sophisticated AI algorithms. These algorithms help the car identify objects, predict their behavior, and make decisions, like when to brake, accelerate, or change lanes.
So it's not just seeing, it's actually understanding what it's seeing.
Exactly. And that understanding comes from something called machine learning.
Machine learning.
Yeah, so basically these AI systems are trained on massive data sets of driving scenarios, learning patterns, and improving their decision-making capabilities over time. The more they experience through data, the better they get at navigating real-world situations.
So it's like they're constantly learning and getting smarter.
Precisely. They're learning from their own experiences and from the experiences of other self-driving cars.
That's pretty wild. So it's not just reacting to what's happening right in front of it, it's also predicting what might happen next.
Yes, and that's crucial for safe driving, right? Anticipating what other cars, pedestrians, or cyclists might do.
Absolutely. Now, we've talked about the sensors, the AI, the machine learning, but what about navigation? How does the car know where it is and where it needs to go?
Well, just like you and I might use GPS on our phones, self-driving cars rely on GPS for their overall positioning.
Right, GPS. That makes sense.
But they also use something called HD maps.
HD maps, what are those?
HD maps are super detailed maps, much more precise than the ones we use on our phones. They provide incredibly accurate information about the road layout, including lane markings, elevation changes, and even the exact location of things like traffic signs and utility poles.
Wow, that's impressive. So it's combining real-time data from the sensors with this pre-existing, highly accurate map information.
Precisely. That way, the car has a much richer understanding of its surroundings.
So it's like having a superpower sense of location.
Exactly. And looking even further into the future, there's the potential for something called V2V and V2I communication.
V2V and V2I, what are those?
V2V stands for vehicle-to-vehicle communication, and V2I is vehicle-to-infrastructure communication. It's basically the idea that cars could communicate wirelessly with each other and with the infrastructure around them, like traffic lights and road signs.
So it's like the cars and the roads themselves could start talking to each other.
Exactly. Imagine a world where your car knows what the car next to you is going to do. or where it can get real-time information about traffic light changes or upcoming construction zones.
Okay, yeah, that would be huge for safety and efficiency.
Absolutely.
So we've taken a pretty deep dive into the technology behind self-driving cars. Now let's talk about why people are so excited about them in the first place, the potential benefits.
Okay, let's do it.
I think the biggest one, the one that everyone always talks about, is safety.
Yeah, for sure.
The idea that these cars could dramatically reduce the number of accidents on the road, because let's face it, human error is a huge factor in most car crashes.
Absolutely. Things like distracted driving, drunk driving, drowsy driving, these are all things that autonomous vehicles wouldn't do.
Right. They don't get tired, they don't get distracted, they don't make emotional decisions,
Exactly. They just follow the rules and focus on driving safely.
which could potentially save a lot of lives.
It's a powerful idea.
It is. And beyond safety for everyone, there's also the benefit of increased accessibility for people who might not be able to drive themselves.
That's a really important point. People with disabilities, the elderly, anyone who's currently limited in their transportation options could suddenly have much more freedom and independence.
Imagine being able to go anywhere you want, whenever you want, without having to rely on someone else to drive you.
Yeah, that would be life-changing for a lot of people.
And then there's the convenience factor, right?
Yeah.
I think most people would agree that their daily commute isn't exactly the highlight of their day.
Definitely not. It's
Yeah.
often stressful and time-consuming.
Exactly. But imagine if you could just sit back, relax, and let the car do the driving. You could read a book, catch up on work, even take a nap.
It would turn wasted time into productive time. You could reclaim that part of your day.
Exactly. And it's not just about individual convenience. There are broader benefits for society, too, like reduced traffic congestion and better fuel efficiency.
Yeah, with cars all driving in a more coordinated and efficient way, you could potentially see smoother traffic flow, less stop and go, which would also lead to less fuel consumption and emissions.
So better for the environment, too.
Absolutely. And in the long run, you could even see changes in the way our cities are designed, with less need for parking spaces and potentially more space for parks and green spaces.
So it's not just about the cars themselves, it's about reshaping our urban landscapes.
It's a whole system change.
It is. Okay, so we've talked about all the amazing potential benefits, but now let's shift gears and talk about the potential downsides, the things that we need to be cautious about.
All right, let's get real.
So first and foremost, safety. Even though the goal is to make roads safer, we've already seen that self-driving cars aren't perfect. There have been accidents, some of them fatal.
Right, and those accidents raise some important questions. How reliable is the technology? How well can it handle unexpected situations?
Like what happens when a self-driving car encounters something it's never seen before, something that wasn't in its training data?
Exactly. Human drivers can adapt to new situations, use their intuition and experience to make judgments. But AI systems, they're still learning. They might not be able to handle the unexpected as well as a human can.
Right. It's like, what happens when a ball rolls out into the street and a kid runs after it? A human driver would probably slam on the brakes, but would a self-driving car be able to react in time?
That's the kind of scenario that really tests the limits of current AI technology.
And then there's the whole issue of job displacement.
Right, this is the big one. Millions of people around the world make their living by driving. Truck drivers, taxi drivers, delivery drivers. What happens to those jobs when the cars start driving themselves?
Yeah, it's a huge question, and there's no easy answer.
We need to think about retraining programs, new job opportunities, how we support those workers who might be displaced by this technology.
Absolutely. And then there's the whole issue of data privacy and security.
Oh yeah, that's a big one too. These cars are collecting massive amounts of data about where we go, what we do, even how we drive. Who has access to all that information? How is it being used?
Right. It's a little creepy when you think about it.
It is. And what if that data falls into the wrong hands? Could it be used to track us, to target us with advertising, or even worse?
Or what if these systems get hacked? I mean, we're talking about a computer on wheels, basically.
Exactly. The cybersecurity implications are huge.
So many things to think about.
It's not just about the cool technology. It's about all the potential consequences that come with it.
Okay, so we've talked about safety, job displacement, data privacy. Those are some pretty big concerns. And it gets even more complicated when you start talking about the legal and ethical implications of self-driving cars.
Oh yeah, this is where things get really thorny.
Like, who's responsible when a self-driving car gets into an accident? Is it the owner of the car? The manufacturer? The software developer?
That's a question that lawyers and lawmakers are still grappling with. Our current legal frameworks are just not equipped to deal with this kind of situation.
Right, it's a whole new world. And then there's the issue of how our traffic laws even apply to self-driving cars.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what does it even mean to speed when the car is making all the driving gestures?
Yeah, or what about yielding to pedestrians? Or right of way? It's like we need to rewrite the rules of the road.
We might need to, or at least rethink them in a big way.
And then there's the infrastructure itself. Are our roads and cities even ready for self-driving cars?
That's a good question. Some people argue that we need a whole new infrastructure to support autonomous vehicles, things like smart roads and better communication networks.
So it's not just about building the cars, it's about building a whole ecosystem around them.
Exactly. It's a massive undertaking.
So where are we actually seeing self-driving cars on the road today? What's the current state of things?
Well, it's still early days, but there are a few places where you can actually experience self-driving technology firsthand.
Oh, yeah. Like where?
Well, Waymo, they've been operating a commercial robotaxi service in parts of Arizona for a while now. People can hail a ride and be driven around by a fully autonomous car.
Wow, so no driver at all.
Nope, just you and the car's AI system.
That's pretty wild.
It is. And Cruise, another company, they've launched a similar service in San Francisco.
So it's starting to happen in major cities.
It is, but it's not without its challenges. Cruise, for example, has faced some scrutiny and had to make adjustments after a few incidents.
Oh, right. I remember hearing about that. So it's not always smooth sailing.
Definitely not.
What about Tesla? They've got that full self-driving feature, right?
They do, but it's important to remember that it's not truly full self-driving yet.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's still considered a level 2 system, which means the driver needs to be actively monitoring and ready to take over at any time.
Ah, okay. So it's more of a driver assistance system than a truly self-driving one.
Exactly. But it is gathering a lot of data that's helping Tesla improve their self-driving capabilities.
So they're basically using all those Tesla drivers as testers.
In a way, yes.
Interesting. So it's mainly Waymo and Cruise that are offering those true driverless experiences right now?
Yes, for the most part. But it's important to note that it's happening in other parts of the world too.
Yeah.
China, for example, is investing heavily in self-driving technology.
Oh, yeah. I've heard about that.
They've got companies testing and deploying autonomous fleets in several major cities. And Europe is focusing more on autonomous buses and shuttles for public transportation.
So it's a global phenomenon.
It is, definitely.
Okay, so we're starting to see self-driving cars out in the wild, even if it's still limited. But what about the bigger picture? What are the potential societal impacts of removing drivers from the equation? Like, how might our lives change?
Well, one potential impact is that future generations might not even learn to drive.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a big one. It would be a huge cultural shift.
It would. Imagine a world where getting a driver's license is no longer a rite of passage.
Right. Would we lose something important? I mean, driving, it teaches you responsibility, awareness, decision-making skills.
It does. And what would it mean for our sense of freedom and independence?
That's a good question.
And then there's the impact on our cities.
Yeah, how might they change?
Well, if we don't need as many parking spaces, we could repurpose that land for other things like parks, housing, or businesses.
So cities could become more livable, more pedestrian-friendly.
Potentially, yes. But there's also the risk of increased traffic.
Oh, how so?
Well, if transportation becomes super easy and affordable, people might take more trips than they do now, which could lead to more congestion, even with self-driving cars.
So it's not a simple solution to our traffic problems.
Not necessarily. It's a complex system with a lot of moving parts.
It is. Okay, so looking ahead, what are some of the key developments we might see in the world of self-driving cars in the next, say, 5 to 10 years?
Well, I think we're going to see a big expansion of autonomous vehicle fleets, especially for ride-hailing and delivery services.
So more robo-taxis and delivery robots zipping around?
Exactly. And those delivery robots might not just be on the roads. We could see more drones delivering packages, too.
Drones dropping off packages at our doorsteps? That's a pretty futuristic image.
It is. And the infrastructure is going to get smarter, too. We'll see more connected traffic lights, smart roads, and digital signage that can communicate with cars.
So the roads themselves will become part of the self-driving system.
Exactly.
What about public transportation? Could self-driving technology play a role there?
I think so. We could see more autonomous buses and shuttles being integrated into public transit systems, especially for those first mile and last mile connections.
That would be great, especially for people who live in areas that aren't well served by public transportation.
Absolutely. It could make public transit a more viable option for a lot of people.
Okay, so lots of exciting developments on the horizon. But the big question is, will we see true level 5 autonomy, that fully driverless experience, in the next 5 to 10 years?
That's a tough one to predict. The technology is advancing rapidly, but there are still a lot of challenges to overcome, both technical and societal.
So it's possible, but not a guarantee.
Right. It's something to watch closely, for sure.
So bringing it all back to our original question, are we ready for a driverless future?
That's really for each individual to decide.
Yeah, it's a personal question.
It is. We've seen the potential benefits, but we've also seen the potential risks. And there are a lot of ethical and social implications to consider.
It's a decision we're all going to have to make at some point, whether we embrace this technology or not.
Exactly. And it's a decision that deserves careful thought and consideration.
Well, thank you for joining me on this deep dive into the world of self-driving cars. It's been a fascinating conversation.
It really has. And I hope it's given our listeners a lot to think about.
I hope so too. As we move towards this driverless future, it's important that we have these conversations, that we weigh the pros and cons, and that we make informed decisions about the kind of world we want to create.
Well said.
So, on that note, we'll wrap things up for today. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. And until next time, keep exploring.